Hey, everybody, it's Fran Harris, founder of the Black Business Summit, and I am very excited to bring a longtime friend of mine on to talk to you about a very important topic. She and I have been going back and forth for years. I don't know, Aimee, how long we've known each other, but it must be close to a decade or something by now.
Oh, it's much more than a decade because I've been in the DC area for 10
We
years.
old! But I wanted to have Aimee on. There you go. I wanted to have Aimee on because she's an expert at a topic that we don't talk about a whole lot. We don't talk about it a whole lot, which means we probably aren't doing a whole lot in this area. And so, Aimee, let's just get started with an introduction from you about who you are, where you came from, and how you got to this place.
Actually, Fran and I met years ago when I was in Massachusetts. Now, she came and spoke when I was running the New England Black Chamber of Commerce, as well as an entrepreneurship center for the law school that I had attended.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the reasons why I'd even gone to law school was I was mindful of the fact that you can't win the game if you don't know the rules and the rules of the law. And we were not winning the game of economic empowerment. So went to law school and created the New England Black Chamber of Commerce when I came out, and actually subsequently was a part of the creation of the U.S. Black Chambers, because it was really important for us to not just have jobs, but to build businesses. And so we needed to know how to do that. We needed to do that well, and then be empowered to do that. But then I also realized that not only were we not having control by not having businesses, but when we passed away, our assets would be lost generationally. Generational assets would be lost. So I went back to get my LLM, which is a Master of Laws in Elder Law and Estate Planning. So what we know is that we are, as Black people, 30% of us have an estate plan, and even less of us have a business succession plan. So we know that when we don't plan, our assets get distributed in any which way that the government chooses to distribute it.
Yeah. Wow. This is a dramatic pause for a lot of reasons. For a couple of things you don't know. First of all, my mom died when I was 16. She didn't have a will. She didn't have an estate plan. She didn't have insurance. And everybody listening out there to me right now, or your heart's probably stopping, your stomach is probably feeling kind of weird. But that's reality. That's my personal story. That was at age 16. That was a long time ago. But there was nothing like that in place. And when that happened, even at 16, Aimee, I was like, I don't know what needed to happen here, but this is not going to happen to me. I'm not going to stand by and let this happen again. And so let's talk a little bit, Aimee, about why. I mean, was there anything personal for you other than the fact that you mentioned how percentages of us don't do this stuff that really made you go in this direction, though?
You know, we complain so much about why the white people deny us from access.
Mm-hmm.
I look at the racial wealth gap. I am a child of two folks who have fought for community or, civil rights forever. However, we need to do what we need to do. We can't blame other people for the stuff that we can control.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that I can see us doing time and time again. I can see us losing houses and property because we don't plan. We can't be mad at anybody else but us.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
And I've learned that when I can see a need and I can meet that need, do it. And so that's why we've created a national organization, a network of estate planning attorneys. So it's like, how do we create, protect, and transfer wealth? Let's do that. Mm-hmm. Let's make a change.
Too funny, and not in the ha-ha. My cousin and I were in New York this past week and just doing some business stuff. And one of the things we were talking about was the fact that some people in our past, in our forefathers' past, had taken land from my grandfather, not my great-great-grandfather, not my great-great-great-great-grandfather, but literally just a generation ago. And I know that you know stories of people who have had that happen. Probably everybody listening to me has had that happen. We're talking about substantial land, Aimee, like substantial assets, and just came in and just said, we're going to take these. You don't get to keep these or whatever. And think about how that changed our lives. Think about how what that did for my family's financial basis, my financial legacy, and those kinds of things. What kinds of stories do you typically hear in your work, Aimee, that even motivate you more to do what you're doing?
So one of the things that we know is that especially real property is the foundation of wealth for the Black community.
Yeah.
Right? Foundation of wealth. And I'll never forget having this conversation with a gentleman, and I lost the statistic about how much property we lose each day.
Yes.
Not each year, each day. And so we know when there is no estate plan, and grandma leaves the property to mom, and mom leaves it to her mom and her siblings by not planning. And then the siblings leave it to their siblings by not, or the children to their children by not planning. So conceptually, like 20 people own a piece of property, and then nobody's responsible. All you need is one person saying, I want my share, and that means the property must be sold. All you need is people saying, I'm not paying the taxes because it's not mine,
Yes.
and the property is lost. We lose so much. One of the stories that I had that broke my heart is I met with a mom who had 3 houses and 3 kids. She had it was her plan to give a house to each child. And she had transferred one, and then the other 2 were going to be transferred, but she passed away. Literally, I had met with her. I knew what she wanted. I knew the plan. The other 2 had not been distributed, and she didn't complete the plan in time, and she passed away. So while we all knew that the other 2 properties were for the other 2 children, the eldest who had received his inheritance already said, nope, she didn't write a will, so I am entitled to a third of each of the properties. That required that the other 2 properties had to be sold. He sued them to make sure that those other 2 properties were sold. So the homes that they had, the homes that one of the daughters was living in for 20 years, she lost. Wow. Greed and grief. Unfortunately, we know that everybody who is, just because they're blood relatives does not mean they will treat you fairly.
Right. Or that they're family. All right, so
exactly.
So let's take a step back and let's define what estate planning. You've mentioned estate planning and business succession. So let's just very simplistically define what is estate planning.
Estate planning answers 3 questions. What happens when you die? What happens when you're incapacitated and can't make decisions for yourself or manage your own affairs? Mm-hmm. And 3, what we like to focus on is what's the legacy that you want to leave, right? So it's not just a matter of identifying, just doing a will, right? Yeah. And so what I tell people all the time is everybody has a will. Mm-hmm. It's whether you've written it or the state. Yeah. Fortunately, for those of us, fortunately or unfortunately, for some of us, we don't get around to writing our own will like Aretha Franklin, like Prince. And so the state writes a will for you. Yeah. With that in mind, we know that it's a formula, right? And in that formula, it doesn't take into consideration who really liked you, who really treated you well. It's just a blood relationship, blood and legal relationship. Yeah. So we as Black folks don't necessarily get bogged down with doing things legally. Like we get divorced by leaving without necessarily getting a divorce. We adopt children by just letting them move in without necessarily having a legal option. And we disinherit by just not talking to folks. So if we do those things, the will that the state creates does not honor those actions, right? But we need to be thoughtful about what is really true? What is really the relationship? What is really the legacy? I'm mindful of the fact that I love my children more than words can say, mm-hmm. but I'm a controlling person. And now what I want is when I pass away, they don't get to just do whatever they want with my stuff. Yeah. It's my grandchildren get to go to college. My grandchildren get to have the house, the deposits on their home. Yeah. So I get to reinforce the values that I want. Right? They can't sell my house and divide it between the 2. That's not an option because I get to make the rules because it's my stuff. Yeah. If both of my children are married and they are both very happy right now, but I don't trust that will always happen because I have a husband. I know that marriages don't always last forever. Yeah. So I don't want, if my children's marriages don't last, I don't want the ex-spouses to walk away with any of my stuff. Yeah. So we get to plan for that. We get to create strategies that we can manage it in a way that our legacies will continue to grow so our children and our children's children receive an inheritance.
This is so, so important, Aimee. And I'm so glad you're doing this because I know the quality of person you are. And I know how doggedly stubborn and, and controlling you are and for the good of the cause. And so this is really important because you can't, those of you watching right now, you're going, I don't really want to, I don't like to talk about that. There is no greater pain, in my opinion, than having your mother, your spouse, or whatever, somebody die. And there's absolutely, it's completely out of your hands. Completely out of your hands. There's nothing you can plan the funeral. We'll let you plan the funeral. You can do that, but that's pretty much.
With a GoFundMe account.
Yeah, exactly. So this is so important. And we're going to talk to Aimee about how you can take the next step to do that. But before we do that, Aimee, let's talk about business succession, another passion of mine. What is that?
So we talk about at the Griffin firm the 5 Ds of business succession, things that we need to consider and plan for. That is disability, divorce, dissolution, departure, and death.
Yeah.
Those 5 things, circumstances, we need to plan for as we build our business, right? Because what we know is we can't always guarantee perfect health. So if I'm running a business and I become incapacitated, who can step in? Who can manage? Who can write the checks? Who can, manage the business during my incapacity, right? Number one. If I become divorced, and I see this so often in my business where people are divorced and the spouse who is not an active member of the business, has not built the business, wants to make a claim on the business.
Yeah.
How do we plan for that? We've seen businesses destroyed because of divorce, right? And so, as well as I think of not just my divorce, but let's say I have a partner. What is the impact of their divorce on our business? How do we figure and plan for that? Dissolution. If we're dissolving our business for voluntary or involuntary reasons, what does that look like? How do we manage that in a way that is equitable and fair, right? Then we think about departure, and departure can mean a retirement. It could mean that we are, that we just need to leave the business. We want to sell it. How do we want to make that happen? Because the truth of the matter is, we're going to leave the business one way or the other.
Yeah.
And then, when we depart, are we selling it to a third party? Are we leaving it for our children? What is that strategy? If I have a child, I have a daughter who's also an attorney. If I left my business to her, does that mean there's inequity for my son? Right. So we need to create a structure that allows for us to feel good and feel proud about, one, the operations. How do my employees impacted? How are my clients impacted when I depart from this business? And then finally, death. When actually I was talking to the president of the bank yesterday about a circumstance when a principal of a company passed away and there wasn't an estate plan or a business succession plan. We can manage some of these things for the operating agreement or the shareholders agreement, but we need to manage them. Right. We need to identify them expressly. We can't take it for granted. Yeah. And those are the things that we just say, oh, when I get around to it. I believe that Prince thought he was going to get around to doing it. I believe that Aretha said, oh yeah, it'll work itself out. Yeah. Unfortunately, in both of those cases, what we know is that there is, like with Prince, we know $120 million in taxes were paid. That's ridiculous. Yeah. And then on top of all of the legal action, the legal fees that have been accrued because of the mess that it is. Aretha Franklin had a child who had special needs. Now, there are so many ways that taxes could have been avoided. Right. But because there was no plan, there's a huge tax liability, which would be about 40% on her actually about $65 million. Wow. So we need to be thinking about how do we avoid that? Yeah. Right. And how do we not make it so that our assets are frozen? Because when I pass away and the things that are solely in my name, the asset is frozen. Because I can't sign my name anymore. If there is no other designation, that's the problem, right? So if I can't sign, if I haven't given instructions on what to handle, how to handle it, it's just frozen until the court says differently.
Yeah. When we're talking about these topics, there are people who are watching us like, well, that's for people who got a lot of money. That's for y'all. I don't have to deal with those kinds of things. I'm not going to even bother about that. I'm never going to have $65 million. I'm never going to have $1 million. There are people who are literally watching us right now, Aimee, who are thinking that's rich folk stuff y'all talking about. That's wealthy folk stuff y'all talking about. What do you say to those folks right now who are thinking in that way?
Now, the reality is, if you have anybody dependent upon any of your stuff,
Yeah.
you need to think differently. Because it may not be $1 million, but I can tell you folks are looking for the hundreds of dollars, right? Because having whatever you have is needed.
Yeah.
Right. And whatever you have is beneficial for the people who you care for. So we need to stop thinking about it's not me and take responsibility for moving forward. I'll never forget, I was in court, and it seems ridiculous, but I was in court representing a family where the only assets was a house that had a reverse mortgage and a bank account that had a negative $697 balance, right? And it was a fight. There was a fight.
Yeah.
Now, greed and grief makes people act in ridiculous ways. So we need to be thinking, how do we create decency and order? Yeah. How do we create a plan? How to create peace in our family? One of the things that we know is there's a capacity to build up and there's capacity to tear down if we do nothing. Yeah. I tell people all the time, you should have your first estate plan at the age of 18 because that's when you become an adult. Yeah. And that's when you have privacy and that's when the rules matter. So we need to be thinking about how do we put those instructions in place right away, because planning now saves a whole lot of stuff later. 30% of Black people have an estate plan. That means 70% do not. Right? One of my favorite stories is about a woman named Osceola McCarty, and she was conceived in rape, right? So, and I don't say that to be disparaging, but to say that she had modest beginnings. And then she dropped out of school in 6th grade. She was a woman in Mississippi who dropped out of school to help her family to make money as a laundry woman. Yeah. One of her clients was a estate planning attorney, and another one was a financial advisor. She was very frugal. Let me be clear. She was very frugal. And she had no kids. But when she died, she left $150,000 to the University of Southern Mississippi. Yeah. Now, and then other people matched it. And I say that to say little can become much if you plan for it, right? And if, as I said, 70% of us do not have an estate plan. If we all did what we were supposed to do, our community organizations would want for nothing, right? Barack Obama was able to be successful getting $25 from it. A whole bunch of people. So if we as a community put our hundreds or $25 together, we can change things. Yeah. But if we don't do anything, we just let that money evaporate. Yeah, yeah. What I've asked every expert that I've talked to is for us to be where we are, and I'm talking to people who are hugely successful by a lot of definitions. But for us to get where we are, there had to be some shift in our paradigms to start doing and behaving in the ways that we behave that have made us successful, right? So for you, Aimee, what was one of those mindset shifts or those shifts in paradigms that you had to make to start going in a different direction at any point in your life? It was, there is a quote that says, it's not about likes or dislikes. There is no consequence. Just do what must be done. It may not be happiness, but that's greatness. Yeah. And it is a quote actually that my daughter also had posted for me, but it is, I went to law school at 40 and I was working during the day, and I was a single parent at the time, having been divorced, working during the day, going to law school at night, but doing what needed to get done, because if we don't do anything different, we're not going to have anything different. Yep. Wow. What was that like on your what was it like for your family? Because there are folks right now who are using their kids as an excuse and using their divorce as an excuse and using the fact that their mother died when they were 16 as an excuse. What was your family's reaction to you taking on a huge endeavor like that? I think what we realized, what my children know, is difficulty is no excuse for surrender, right? It's like, you just got to do what you need to do to make a difference. We are not here for ourselves. We are here for the greater good, right? And, and as while I was sitting, I remember sitting on the side of the pool watching my kids swim, or sort of watching my kids swim as I'm studying with my torts book, with my contracts book,
Yeah.
But they knew that it's really not, we got to do whatever it takes to get it done.
Yeah.
It's not okay.
Yeah. Yeah, not okay to just, status quo. I've heard people in my family talk about, well, we're going to leave that for our kids to do. And I'm like, well, what are you going to do? What are you going to do to make the situation better while in between your birth and your death? What are you going to do to make the contribution to the family? Well, that's for y'all. That's y'all smart in it. What? Like, seriously, that's, I've heard many conversations like that where it's like, well, that's for the next generation to fix. So as we move forward in these conversations, Aimee, what is one thing from a business standpoint that people can do to take the next step? What would be the next right step, a good next step for them?
The next step is to begin with the end in mind.
Mm-hmm.
Know what you want as outcomes and take steps to make it happen. Don't just think that it will happen by default.
Yeah.
We know clearly that there is no safety parachute. I talk about all the time, Black Lives Matter, but it's only Black lives. Mm-hmm. So if we don't take the actions to care about the people we care about and to make our place, our family, our community better, don't have any expectations that anybody else will.
Yeah, never have. And then from a standpoint of estate planning, the first step or the first next step that someone can take.
First, it's easily call the Griffin firm or go to our website. But think about, really, what do you care about? Yeah. Really, what are your values that you want to live on, right? Who do you care about? Because we know, I say that if you have nobody who cares about you and you don't care about anybody else, mm-hmm. then you don't need an estate plan. Other than that, you need to do something. You need to have the three basic things you need to have is a durable power of attorney that helps you manage your business and financial matters if you're unable to do so. Mm-hmm. That healthcare proxy, identifying who can speak for you when you can't speak for yourself. The advance directive tells them what to say, and the HIPAA waiver gives the health professionals capacity to speak to them. And thirdly, the last will and testament. That gives direction to the probate court of what you want to have happen when you pass away. Now, these are the basic things that people should have at the age of 18. Yeah. For those of us who are older than 18, you need to have this plus, right? And that's what I say, when you have minimal assets, but just because you have a life, those are the things that you need right now.
Two things people are thinking right now, Aimee, two things, and they are thinking this. That sounds expensive, and that sounds hard.
I'd say, so much is given, much is required. If you don't have a whole lot, it doesn't cost a whole lot. Mm-hmm. You can go, and many places have a Groupon where you can get that for.
Right.
I say that if you have very little, you should at least have that and go to the Groupon. But if you have a significant amount of assets, mm-hmm. you need to think about cost versus value. We can spend $50, $60 on getting our hairs and nails done. I know, right? Yeah. But when we think about those things that have a permanent impact on our family, then we need to make the investment in our families for the greater good.
Yeah.
We need to keep getting our hair did every so often, keep getting our nails did. Let's do something that's going to change our families' lives.
Oh, girl. This is so literally amazing, and I'm emotional because there are several things that have happened in the course of my family that we needed to be talking to someone long time ago about this. Now everything changed after that, but it really did take a death for us to go, whoa, wait a minute, and I'm thinking there are people in this family older than I am. Why am I thinking like this? And y'all are not thinking like this. But we fixed it. We absolutely fixed it. And the last thing I want for any of you watching is for you to have, it's already stressful when someone dies. And then you figure out the paperwork is in arrears. The paperwork is not, or you don't have things that you thought you had. And here is Aimee telling us there's an opportunity for you. It will be stressful. Death is not easy. Separation, departure, none of that is easy. But it is manageable. It's definitely manageable if you have your ducks in a row. So Aimee, final thoughts for our audience. We're going to actually put together a passport so they will know how to contact you. They will have your bio. They will have all the good stuff on you and know how to reach you. But any thoughts for them as we get off today?
But what I would say is what we don't know when the end of that dash is going to be.
Yeah.
So don't think that there's tomorrow. Don't think that there's an afternoon.
Mm-hmm.
Make the plans, make the steps. And what I always talk about to people is if we do it when we think it's not going to happen, it's easier to do, as opposed to if we wait till when we can't make the decisions.
Yeah.
But if we wait until it's, we are incredibly ill. We always talk about if we started building that savings plan yesterday,
Mm-hmm.
we're better off for tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
So let's start building our business succession plan, our estate plan yesterday, so that we can modify it as we need to, but that we have something in place already.
Yeah.
That makes the difference and changes lives.
Yeah. And that's a good point. It doesn't, just because you do it, what we did, when I was 17, 18 has changed actually many times. So it's not necessarily something you do and you go, oh, done with that, got to do that. Your life changes, and therefore some of that paperwork, some of those things that you plan must change as well. All right, Aimee, thank you very much for being on the Black Business Summit. Looking forward to seeing you soon in person sometime. Where are you going to be next? You do seminars and stuff around the country?
Absolutely. I will be in Chicago next month, and I'll be in Dallas actually next month as well, too. So.
Okay. All right. Thank you, my sister, for doing this very much. I'll let you know.